Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is a Great Big History podcast. In this episode, we talk about philosophy. Philosophy is science before there's science. Science relies a lot on math in order to prove what's going on. But ancient peoples didn't have the math in order to do that. They simply didn't have it. If you know anything about Roman numerals, they're letters. Well, the Greeks are the same way. The Hebrews are the same way. So there wasn't the arithmetic, there wasn't the theoretical arithmetic available as there would be later on. And so what they used, the Greeks and ancient peoples used, was philosophy. A moral philosophy. They tried to explain how the world worked by certain rules. Greek philosophy becomes huge in Athens after the Peloponnesian War. Well, why? Well, they have to explain why they lost. The Athenians thought of themselves as the best people in the whole wide world. They thought of themselves as the leaders of Greece. They defeated the Persians twice. They were democratic. They were industrious. They were wealthy. They were smart. They were better educated than other Greeks. How could they have lost this war to Sparta, Persia, Thebes, and these other groups of not Athens? How could they lose? And so they had to explain the world and how the world worked. And the way we're going to kind of break down Socrates and Plato and Aristotle is, where does knowledge come from? And why do some people not know what others know? And how do you learn? And what role does all of this play in democratic thought? What role of democratic thought plays in philosophy? So we start with Socrates. Now, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are the three great philosophers. There are other philosophers, but we're going to just do these three. And importantly, they're in a row. Socrates taught Plato, Plato taught Aristotle. So this is 100 years of philosophy. So what we're covering in terms of history is the fall of Athens in the Peloponnesian War to the breaking apart of Alexander's empire. Alexander will be taught by Aristotle for a little while. He will go off with 50,000 men. He'll conquer the Persian Empire. He'll go to Afghanistan. He'll go to India. He'll come back. He'll die of disease in Babylon. And then his empire kind of hangs on for a little while, and then it cracks into multiple parts. And that's the world that these three men live in. From the fall of Athens in the Peloponnesian War to the cracking up of Alexander's universal Greek empire. So Socrates, now he fought in the Peloponnesian War, and he is a veteran of the Battle of Delium. And that's important because Delium is like Guadalcanal. Delium is one of those battles that you just mention you were there, and you don't have to brag or prove your manliness to anybody. Delium is one of the great Athenian defeats to the Thebans during the Peloponnesian War, and most people who were in it got murdered in it. They don't survive. So the fact that Socrates does survive that, not only was he a veteran of the war, not only did he fight for Athens and its democracy, but he also saw what defeat looks like, saw what carnage looks like, saw what running away and hoping not to get stabbed looks like after your phalanx collapses. I also bring this up because I don't want you to think philosophers are pie in the sky. Ooh, what color would I be if I could be a color? Fuchsia. I mean, they could do stuff like that, but that's not these guys. These guys lived in the real world, and they dealt with the real world, and they tried to understand the real world, and the real world affected them. And so Socrates fought in the Peloponnesian War. He's in several battles. And so he is a supporter of democracy. He fought for Athens. He fought for democracy. And you have to understand what democracy means. Democracy doesn't mean that everybody has a vote. It means what you believe in. If you truly believe in democracy, what you believe in is equality, is that all people are equal. That if you are pro-democracy, you believe all people are equal. And so we see this in his philosophy. He is pro-democracy. Why? Because he believes everybody has innate knowledge. All knowledge is innate. It's inside of you. It's in this little place, somewhere underneath the third rib, but to the left a little bit. It's in you. But then if everybody has knowledge, and everybody has the knowledge that they need to know. Now, when he says knowledge, does Socrates mean like nuclear physics? No. What Socrates talks about is the 8 great questions, like what is truth? What is honesty? What is courage? And you're like, oh, these are easy. I know what truth is. Oh, wait, do you? Do you know what truth is? Because we have a little thing that goes on in December where you might want to reconsider how much of a liar you are. Because if you go through the motions of what Americans do in December, with milk and cookies, and presents under trees, and malls, photographs, and all that, you're telling people a lie. And you're encouraging the lie, and you're participating in the lie. And you're going to say, I'm not a bad person. Liars are bad people, but I'm not a bad person. I'm not a liar, but you're a liar. So what is the truth? Is it okay to say to certain young people certain things about December, about what happens in December, for a while? Because it's all fun and it's games? Is it? I mean, it's a giant lie. And so, you know it's a lie. Everybody knows it's a lie. And yet the entire culture participates in it. So does that make you a liar or not? So before you start going, oh, these are easy questions, just realize, how much have you been lied to? And how much do you lie about things you don't even consider to be lies? And so we have this problem. If all knowledge is innate, why are there stupid people? Why are there just some people who don't know the same amount of stuff as other people? We all know them. We drive behind them. Why are there just stupid people? And the answer is that while it is inside of you, you don't know how to get it out of you. You don't know how to access it. It's in there. And you need like to pull on a fishing wire and get it out. And that you need a mentor in. A mentor who uses the Socratic method. And Socrates invents the Socratic method, which is what we do in class. A series of simple questions that are easy to answer, that get you to a final result, a final revelation, a final, I know what we're talking about. And you go, see, it wasn't that hard. But you need somebody who's smarter than you to ask you the right questions, which means, yes, you are equal, but you're also a bit dependent. Which means young people should, aren't equal to older people. If you think about that, young people have less experience than older people. And what Socrates is saying is, older people know more stuff. They've accessed more stuff than younger people. Younger people need an older person to mentor them. Yeah, we're all equal, but we all have access to the same knowledge, and he shades it. So he's pro-democracy, but young people, you still need a mentor. You still need someone with more experience to help you realize your equality. And that's the Socratic method, a series of simple questions that none of them are hard to answer, that lead you to a result. So what happens to Socrates? What happens is he's executed by the state after a trial, but after a democratic trial. In fact, there were 500 people on his jury. Everybody wanted to be on it. And he was accused of being a traitor to the culture, to the state, for teaching bad stuff about whether it's the gods or the culture. And his basically, he taught some stuff. His students went home, told their parents, "Look at mommy, look at what I learned." And the parents said, "You learned what?" And they blamed the teacher, and they put him on trial, and they executed him. And his execution is incredibly important, and that's our painting next. David's painting, if you look up David, the French painter, Socrates' death, you'll know when they sentenced him to die, but in the ancient Greek world, they didn't necessarily haul you out and cut your head off, right? That would be embarrassing. That would be humiliating to you. What mostly they said was, get your affairs in order, and we'll come and get you. And you may go, "Oh, well, why didn't he leave?" Well, the question is, he's a 72-year-old man. Where is he going? People go to him and say, "We can get you out of the city." And he's like, "I'm not going to be in exile. I'm not going to be a coward. I'm not going to run away. Where am I going to go? I'm going to wander the mountains of Greece looking for a home. I'll just be eaten by a cougar or something. Like, I'm not going to do that." And so we have David's, basically his last lecture, where a 72-year-old Socrates is giving a lecture, and he's asking for a cup of poison. Plato is the old man sitting, not looking at the scene, sitting on the left. And there's one analyst idea that this is actually Plato remembering as an old man this moment that of giving up, of Socrates about to commit suicide. But he's not committing suicide because he's been told he's going to be executed. So he's got 2 weeks to get his affairs in order, and then they'll come and get him. Well, what Socrates does is go, "Well, I'm going to take care of this myself before that, because I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of dragging me out of my home kicking and screaming." And so he's got his last lecture, and he's telling his students, and he's got his finger pointed in the air, and he's saying, give me the poison." And he will take the poison and he will die. Why does that matter? It matters because Plato was a student of Socrates. Plato, Plato. Plato is a student of Socrates, and he liked him. He thought Socrates was right. And so a democracy killed his friend and teacher. How does he feel about democracy? He hates it. Democracy is stupid. Democracy does stupid decisions. It's emotional. It's wrong. It lets stupid people make decisions for the group. And so his philosophy will not be supportive of democracy. So he says it's not innate. It's not innate. It's not inside of you. It's in the ether. It's a place that you cannot experience. You cannot see it, taste it, touch it. You cannot go there. The ether, E-T-H-E-R. You cannot experience it. It's a place far away that you cannot go to, see, taste, touch, or experience. That should sound kind of familiar if you're a Christian or a Muslim. So, but what's there? What's in the ether? And his answer is a form, F-O-R-M. Of what? Of everything. The perfect form of everything. So take out a piece of paper and try to draw a circle. Try to draw a nice big circle, just with your hand, and look at it. Is it a circle? No, it's not. Why? Why isn't it a circle? Because a circle is a continuous line of 360 degrees where every point on that line is equidistant from every other point. You can't draw that. You just can't. You could keep trying, but you can't. Why? Because one, you're not perfect. Two, your body is imperfect. Three, the materials you use aren't perfect. And thus, what you claim as a circle is just something that is circular and closer to what your idea of what a circle is supposed to be. You've never seen a perfect circle. You don't know what one looks like. You've seen ones that have been made by compasses. You've seen ones that have had technology help make one. They're still not perfect. They're still not totally down to the micron correct. Why? Because we have pi. And pi is 3.14. It's not a whole number. It has point, and it goes on. It doesn't end. It goes on forever. They're still inventing, finding new numbers that pi is. And it's an infinitesimal difference. But it's a difference. It's not whole. And so but how do you know what a circle is supposed to look like? And more importantly, when you drew your circle, why didn't you draw a pyramid? Why didn't you draw 3 lines connected at 3 points? And you're going to say, well, Professor, that's a triangle. How do you know? Like, honestly, how do you know that's not a circle? And the answer is because someone told you. Someone smarter than you told you. Because if your teacher came out in elementary school and said, draw a circle, and you drew 3 lines interconnected by 3 dots, they would say, no, that's a triangle, stupid. And then they would draw something circular and say, that's a circle. And on your test, you would be marked wrong. And you would have to learn, no. Triangle is 3 lines. Circle is 1 continuous line, like in round. And you'd have to practice that. The idea that it's the other way around would be taken out of you. But how do you know? The only way you know is that someone smarter than you, someone you trusted, or someone who had power, told you. Well, how do they know? Well, someone smarter than them told them. And how do they know? Someone smarter than them told them. And how do they know? And you go all the way back. But the idea Plato has is that somewhere there must have been a first person who said, this is what a circle looks like. Who was jacked in, like Neo in the Matrix, but jacked into the universe and knew what a perfect circle was supposed to look like, even if one can't draw one themselves. And let's face it, this is how grades work. This is how essays work. This is how your book reviews work. This is how movie reviews work. It's like, you are reviewing it against what? Against the thing? No, you're like, yeah, it just doesn't give me the same emotional feeling. It just doesn't work. The dialogue is off. How do you know the dialogue is off? How do you know it's stilted? How do you know the action is too slow? How do you know? Because in your mind, you have an idea of how it should play out. How many times have you left a movie going, I would have done X different? How many times have you read a book and go, that's a cool scene, but I would have done it this way. The character really should have said this. Every screenwriter has people who come up to them and say, I loved your screenplay, but, well, why do they know that? They're not professional screenwriters. How do they know? It's because in their mind, they have an idea of what the perfect script should be like, what the perfect action scene should be like. But here's the thing. Nothing can be what is in their mind. Because what's in their mind is the idea, is the form, not the thing. And so you can write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and it still will never be what's in your mind. And that's okay. But the idea is the more you rewrite, the more it's getting closer to that perfect essay, that perfect movie, that perfect review, that perfect speed game run, that perfect rap. The more you do it, the closer it is getting to that thing in your mind. And so you have the perfect form of the thing. And if you've ever tried to go buy a car, you don't buy the first car you see. But why don't you buy the first car you see? Well, because in your mind, you're like, no, the seats should feel like this, or the steering wheel should move like that, or it should have this many dials. You have in your mind the idea of the car that you want, of the perfect car. And the car you buy is not the perfect car. It will never be, because they always make better cars. So the car you buy is the car closest to the idea of that car. And that's where St. Augustine will invent heaven. Now you're like, that's Jesus. I'm going to say no. And you're going to say, that's God. And I'm going to say no. Because heaven as a place is invented by God. Fine. But heaven as an idea is invented by St. Augustine. The idea that heaven is a perfect place where everything in it is perfect is not in your Bible. Heaven is mentioned, yes, and heaven is mentioned as a good place, but it's not described. It could just be you hanging out with Jesus. All that's there is good people plus Jesus. You get to hang forever. And the assumption is that's pretty cool. But the idea of golden streets, of puppies never becoming full-size dogs and shedding all over the place, the idea of lampposts made of chocolate and no one ever getting fat ever, or getting fat because that's what they want to do, that idea comes from St. Augustine's book, The City of God. St. Augustine in the 400s AD was a bishop in Africa, in northern Africa, in the Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire was collapsing. And so people came to him and said, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And he said, what was the Christian idea at the time? Don't worry about it. The empire will fall. It doesn't matter. Heaven matters. And their next question was, what's heaven like? We have read our Bible, and it ain't telling us what to do, what it's going to be like at the end of the Roman Empire. And he says, well, have you read your Plato? And they say, of course we've read our Plato. We're Romans. What the hell, man? What do you think? He's like, well, I just wanted to ask. So if you've read your Plato, you know what he says. He says the ether is a perfect place where everything in it is perfect, where the perfect form of everything is perfect. That's heaven. Plato wasn't a Christian. He's 400 years before Jesus. If he was a Christian, he would have said, that's heaven. And what we get is the creation of heaven as this perfect place where everything is perfect, but also the perfect God, which is not a ancient Judaic idea. It's a Christian idea. It's a New Testament idea. That Jesus is perfect is a New Testament idea. The prophets in the Old Testament are not perfect. God is not perfect. You know this by the Noah story. God wipes out all the earth and then says, oops, I probably shouldn't do that anymore. And then says to Noah, here's a rainbow. I'll never do that again. Well, why would he never do that again? Unless it was the wrong thing. Unless he felt bad about it. It's not. It's just God is not perfect. God is right. But God makes mistakes. The book of Job is all about God effing up. Like, even if you take the majority view where Job apologized at the end, God still made a bet. He gambled with the life of someone who worshipped him. Is a good God supposed to do that? And the answer to that is no. Of course not. A good God is protective, not destructive. Now, there's a whole thing about Job and how there's a possibility that's not really a Judaic story. It's a story from Babylon that becomes Judaic, and there's a whole bunch of things. But the idea of the Old Testament where God is perfect and does everything perfect is Augustine, where God is the perfect emperor of a perfect Rome. Because that's how they understood it. That's not your idea of heaven. You are suburban people. You live in the suburbs. And so probably your idea is a suburban idea. Lots of parks, lots of clean streets, lots of walking or biking or maybe cars, but no traffic. Your idea of heaven is your life just better. And that's City of God. It is the Roman life just better. And that's the idea that is not a democratic idea. Because Augustine is telling people what heaven is like. It is someone smarter than you. You are dependent. You cannot figure this stuff out on your own. Plato will tell you what you need to know. So the idea is a smart person will tell you what you need to know, and you are too dumb to figure it out yourself. So just shut up. And we see this in the book The Republic. In his book The Republic, which is not really a republic, the smart people run the show, the dumb people do the work, the strong people fight in the army, and there you go. And now Plato is at least innovative in that men and women, he doesn't break it down between men and women. He's like, if a woman is smart, she gets to run the show. If a man is dumb, he's got to work. But the idea is someone smarter than you will tell you what you need to do. And so we see this in the Republic. He is not for democracy. He is not democratic because he watched a democracy kill his friend. So that brings us to Aristotle, the student of Plato, and didn't like him. Aristotle thought Plato was wrong. He listened to all of this and said, all right, you're the old man telling me what to do. That means you think you're smarter than me. I think you're wrong. He did not like him. So the answer is he's not going to have the same philosophy. His philosophy is going to be different. And if you're on the video, you could see this is Aristotle teaching a young Alexander, talking to a young Alexander. Now, this is a classical, you know it's a young Alexander because of the Greek helmet that's behind him. But Aristotle didn't teach Alexander by himself. He taught a class of like 15 young men, all noblemen, something like 4 generals, 3 kings, a whole host. It's probably one of the most like densely packed classes of future talent that any class might have. It puts like modern Harvard classes to shame. It is like the people who are in that class with Aristotle and Alexander are going to end up running the world for the next century. And so it's pretty cool if you were in that class. They have a big future ahead of them. So it's interesting that it's just Alexander and Aristotle, but it would have been Alexander and, a bunch of his compatriots. Now, where does he think nature is? Well, he doesn't think it's inside of you. That was Socrates. He doesn't think it's outside of you, far away where you can't touch it. That's Plato. He thinks it's around you. It's in nature. You can experience it. It's in the environment around you. You can see it. You can taste it. You can touch it. So who has access? Everyone has access to nature. You could just go walk. You want to know how a river works? Go and look at a river. So how do you learn? Observation. Experience. You go and do it. Observation. And the idea is that you figure out the important components. And we see this in his books, The Poetics and the Politics, that there are certain things that things are made up of. So instead of telling you like Plato would have said, this is the perfect play. Aristotle doesn't say that. He says, a good play has these 5 points in it. It will have, I've watched a lot of plays. The best ones have all 5 of these points. And that's the idea. And basically, that's how screenwriters write today. I have a whole stack of how to write novels, how to write screenplays, and all of these famous guys basically tell you to go back and read the 68 pages of, which is essentially a lecture. It's not a book, of the Poetics, because it tells you right there what components you need. And if you have those components, they were good 2,000 years ago. They're good today. So the poetics, or the politics, what makes a good government? These 5 things, X, Y, Z, A, B, C. That's 6 things, but the politics. So you observe, and then what you'll see is that it has certain components. What does a good marriage have? You could say, Plato would say, take a look at that marriage. That's a perfect marriage. Study it, follow it, do it. Aristotle says, well, everybody's different. They do different things. Every marriage is different, but good marriages have these 5 components to them. And so what we see is these components that make good government, good art, that are part of it. So what about democracy? he thinks it's got potential, but he also thinks it's not quite there yet. Why? Because, well, people do stupid things, or more likely, they choose not to do smart things. See, if the only way you can learn is to observe, why are there stupid people? Well, they don't go and learn. They don't go and observe. They stay home and play Fortnite. They don't engage in nature. They choose. They could do it. Aristotle says you could do it. Thus, he's pro-democracy. Everybody's equal in their chance to know. But their people are ignorant. He wouldn't say they're stupid. He'd say they're ignorant. Stupid people can't know. That's Plato. Ignorant people choose not to know. They make a choice not to participate in the knowledge. And so, now, just as an aside, in the Middle Ages, Aristotle wins. Aristotle is considered in the Middle Ages to be the smartest man who ever lived. He was right. Whatever he wrote, whatever he said, people in the middle, by the time of the Middle Ages, basically said he won all bar bets. If you could pull out a book and say, here, Aristotle said this, I win, you won. Because Aristotle was right. In fact, Europeans, or I should say Europeans do this, but everyone, the invention of science is science in order to prove Aristotle wrong. Francis Bacon, Galileo famously, Isaac Newton, all of these guys had Aristotle. And they were like, I think Aristotle's wrong. And everybody said, that's ridiculous. Aristotle is, of course, right. And he went, well, I'll prove it. And they're like, how? Aristotle is right. Everybody says Aristotle's right. You're the idiot. So you had to make science. And how often does science have to be right? Science has to be right every time. Science can't be wrong. Science can't be off. An experiment can't work once. Otherwise, it's alchemy or magic. It's something else. Science, to be science, has to be right every time. Why? Because they had to compete with Aristotle, which everyone assumed was right. And to get people to change, they had to prove, beyond any doubt, that Aristotle was wrong. And this is famously Galileo's issue. Galileo sees the moons of Jupiter. He knows the moons of Jupiter go around Jupiter, thus don't go around the Earth. Thus, Copernicus and Copernicus and his heliocentric idea must be right. The church freaked out for a whole variety of reasons we'll get into when we do science in 102. But it freaked out because think about it this way, if Aristotle was wrong, maybe the Bible's wrong, and it's not too far of a leap for people to be like, well, maybe the church just shouldn't tell us what to do. Because the church is very Platonic. The church is like, I will tell you what the answer is. I will tell you how to get to heaven. And if people start to think Aristotle's wrong, they might think the church is wrong. If they think the church is wrong, they might think the Bible is wrong. And then the whole gig is up. Then people could just go do whatever they want. And the church won't have any power. They won't matter. The whole system would collapse. And so the church goes to Galileo, you can't say this. You can't do this. And so they put him on trial for heresy. And famously, Galileo is found guilty. And he's walking away, and he goes out of the side of his mouth as he's walking away, he goes, it still moves. Meaning the universe. And the idea is, you can punish me all you want. This is the facts. It still moves. This is how most scientists feel about climate change in the debate. There's plenty of people who are saying, no, there's no climate change. And it's like, it's still getting hotter. It's still getting hotter. It's still getting hotter. Like, that's just a fact. Like, you can say it's not happening all you want. The temperature says it's still getting hotter. So Aristotle's going to win of the three of them. Plato is incredibly important, especially for Greeks and Romans. An imperialist, anyone who likes empire likes Plato because I will tell you what you need to know. Anyone who likes superiority, anyone who likes power likes Plato because he indulges that. He gives you the philosophy of how you get to run a show, a system, to tell other people. Aristotle we'll go find it for yourself. You can do it on your own, but you can also choose not to. And so Socrates and Aristotle are pro-democracy, but in different ways, and they represent in different ways. And Plato is anti-democracy and a hard no on democracy. And that's where we're going to end. In our next couple of lectures, we're going to start to do wars. We're going to do the Persian Wars and then the Peloponnesian Wars. We're going to talk about some societies. We're going to make empires and wreck them. And it's going to be the next couple of lectures. And then we're on to the Romans. So see you then. Bye.